They thought the kiss would kill her. They thought Seraphina Moonwhisper was a broken Omega, too weak to survive her own defiance, too fragile to stand against the ancient bonds that bound her kind. The hundreds of wolves gathered in the great hall that
My loyal
night
subjects,
believed
the
they
hour
would
of
witness her
reckoning is at
destruction.
hand. We shall
Her
rise and
humiliation,
claim our
her
destiny.
final submission to a
Please,
fate
you
she
must
could not escape.
reconsider.
But
It
they
is
were
done.
wrong.
There is
King
no
Theron
other way.
Nightshade
But I
wasn't looking
cannot
for a
bear
perfect
it.
mate when her lips touched his. He was protecting
The time
her
has
from
come.
a monster. And in that desperate kiss,
We march
something
at
awakened
dawn.
between them that would shake the foundations of their world. This is their story. The great hall of the Obsidian Palace blazed with torchlight. 300 wolves filled the ancient chamber nobles in their finest silks, warriors with polished weapons at their sides, council members in ceremonial robes that whispered of power and tradition. The air hummed with anticipation, thick with the scent of pine smoke and expectation. Tonight, the moon goddess herself would bless a sacred bond. Seraphina stood before the bonding altar, her hands trembling inside the long sleeves of her simple white gown. She was small, barely 5'3", with dark hair that fell in waves past her shoulders and eyes the color of storm clouds. 3 days ago, those eyes had burned with silver fire when Kalen Shadowthorn placed his mark upon her shoulder, the crescent moon brand that declared her his chosen mate. She had felt it then through the gift that made her different from other Omegas, through the empath ability that let her sense the truth beneath surface smiles and honeyed words. She had felt the darkness in his soul. Now, as the moon reached its zenith above the palace, that mark burned against her skin like a brand of ownership she never wanted. Around her, the assembled wolves waited in reverent silence. At the head of the hall, seated upon a throne of black stone, King Theron Nightshade watched with eyes like liquid silver. He had ruled for 333 years. Alone. Always alone. Seraphina's gaze flickered to him for just a moment. Even from across the vast chamber, she felt the weight of his attention. He was magnificent in his formal attire, all sharp angles and controlled power, dark hair touching his shoulders, a face that could have been carved from granite, beautiful and terrible, and utterly untouchable. She looked away quickly. Kalen stood beside her at the altar, golden-haired and handsome, dressed in silver ceremonial armor that caught the firelight. To everyone watching, he was perfection itself. The eldest son of House Shadowthorn. Wealthy, powerful, chosen by divine will to bond with an Omega who should have been grateful for such an honor. His hand found hers squeezing tight enough to bruise. "Smile," he whispered, his breath hot against her ear. "Or I'll make you regret this even more than you already do." Seraphina's gift flared at the contact. Through his skin, she felt what he truly was, the rage simmering beneath his charm, the cruelty he kept hidden behind practiced smiles, the pleasure he took in causing pain, and something else, something darker. The memory of another woman's terror as she fell from a cliff, pushed by hands that should have protected her. The high priestess stepped forward, an ancient wolf with white hair and eyes that had witnessed countless bonding ceremonies. She raised her hands to the moon visible through the great skylight above. "Children of the goddess," her voice rang out, magically amplified to reach every corner of the hall. "We gather to witness a sacred union. The moon goddess, in her infinite wisdom, has chosen these two souls to be bound. Lord Kalen Shadowthorn and Lady Seraphina Moonwhisper shall be joined under her blessed light." The wolves murmured their approval. This was how it had always been. The goddess chose. The chosen obeyed. To refuse was to spit in the face of divine will itself. The high priestess turned to Seraphina. "Do you, Seraphina Moonwhisper, accept the bond the goddess has decreed? Do you take Lord Kalen as your mate to honor and obey, to bind your soul to his for all the days of your life?" The words stuck in Seraphina's throat. She thought of Isabella Fairborn, Kalen's previous betrothed, the beautiful Omega who had died 2 weeks ago in what everyone called a tragic accident, a fall from the cliffs during an evening walk. But Seraphina knew the truth. She had found Isabella's body while gathering moonflowers in the forest, had touched the cold skin and been flooded with the dead woman's final moments. The vision had been so clear, so terrible. Kalen's hands on Isabella's shoulders, his voice cold and merciless. "You should have kept your mouth shut about what you found." The push, the fall, the awful moment of realization that the man chosen for her by the goddess was the one who would kill her. "Lady Seraphina," the high priestess's voice held a note of warning. "The goddess awaits your answer." 300 pairs of eyes bored into her. Kalen's grip on her hand tightened until bones ground together. "I cannot." The words fell into the silence like stones into still water. For a heartbeat, no one moved. No one breathed. Then the hall erupted. "What did she say?" someone shouted. "She's refusing the bond. Blasphemy! The high priestess stared at Seraphina with something between shock and pity. Child, you do not understand what you're saying. The goddess has chosen. I understand perfectly. Seraphina's voice shook, but she forced the words out. She pulled her hand from Kalen's grip, stepped back from the altar. I cannot bond with him. I will not. Kalen's face transformed. The charming mask shattered, replaced by something ugly and twisted. You dare to refuse me in front of everyone. From the crowd, Lord Malachar. Shadowthorn rose from his seat near the throne. Kalen's father was an imposing figure, silver-haired and cold-eyed, dressed in the black and silver of his house. His voice carried the weight of decades of power. This Omega is clearly defective, he announced, each word precise and cutting. Broken. She cannot recognize the honor the goddess has bestowed upon her. She insults not only my son, but the moon goddess herself. The council members nodded, murmuring agreement. Counselor Obsidian Grimwald, a thin man with calculating eyes, stepped forward. By ancient law, an Omega who refuses her divine bond is unfit to live among the pack. She has proven herself worthless, damaged beyond repair. The words rained down on Seraphina from all sides. Broken, defective, worthless, disgrace. She had heard these words before, whispered behind hands, muttered, when people thought she couldn't hear. Her empath gift made her different, strange. Omegas were supposed to be gentle and obedient, not blessed with abilities that let them see the darkness in others' hearts. But she had never heard the words shouted with such venom, had never stood before hundreds of her kind and been condemned by all of them at once. Kneel, Grimwald's command cracked like a whip. Kneel before your mate and beg his forgiveness. Accept the bond the goddess has decreed or face the consequences of your blasphemy. Seraphina's legs trembled. Every instinct screamed at her to drop to her knees, to lower her eyes, to submit as she had been taught since childhood. But when she looked at Kalen, she saw Isabella's terror reflected in his cold smile. I will not kneel, she whispered. Then louder, I will not bond with a murderer. The hall went deathly silent. Kalen laughed. The sound was sharp, disbelieving. A murderer? You've lost your mind along with your sense. Guards restrain her before she hurts herself. Two warriors moved forward, reaching for Seraphina's arms. She stumbled back, her heart hammering so violently she thought her ribs might crack. I know what you did to Isabella, she said, desperate now. I saw it. I felt her final moments. You pushed her from the cliffs because she discovered your crimes. The embezzlement. The treason. Enough! Malachar's roar shook the rafters. The girl is mad with fear, hallucinating. Remove her from this sacred ceremony. The guards grabbed Seraphina's arms, their grip bruising. She struggled, but they were so much stronger. You're all fools, she gasped out. He's killed before. He'll kill again. The goddess didn't choose him for me. A hand struck her face, hard enough that her vision went white at the edges. Kalen stood over her, his expression a mask of righteous fury. You will learn respect. My father is right. You're broken. Defective. A Omega who cannot accept her place is worse than worthless. She's a disease that must be cut out before it spreads. Grimwald raised his staff and the hall fell silent once more. By the authority vested in this council, I pronounce judgment. Seraphina Moonwhisper, you have committed the ultimate blasphemy. You have rejected the goddess's will. You have slandered a noble lord without proof. You have disrupted a sacred ceremony. He paused, letting the words sink in. The sentence is death. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Even among wolves, executing an Omega was rare. Omegas were precious to be protected, unless they were broken. Seraphina felt the world tilt beneath her feet. Death. They were going to kill her because she wouldn't bond with her own murderer. Wait. The single word cut through the chaos like a blade. King Theron Nightshade rose from his throne. Every eye turned to him. Every wolf in the hall felt the shift in the air, the pure alpha dominance that rolled off him in waves. He moved down the steps from his throne with fluid grace, each footfall echoing in the sudden silence. He was taller than she remembered. 6.5 feet of controlled power moving like violence wrapped in silk. His silver eyes swept the hall, and where his gaze landed, wolves lowered their heads in instinctive submission. He stopped 10 feet from where Seraphina knelt between the guards. Release her. The guards let go immediately, stepping back as if burned. Theron looked at Grimwald, at Malachar, at Kalen. When he spoke, his voice was soft, dangerous. Did I hear correctly? You sentenced an Omega to death without allowing her to invoke ancient law. Grimwald's confidence faltered. Your Majesty, the law is clear. Blasphemy against the goddess is superseded by the right of claiming. Theron's eyes found Seraphina's. Is it not? Seraphina's mind raced. The right of claiming, the ancient law her grandmother had told her about in stories. A law so old most wolves had forgotten it existed. A kiss freely given before witnesses could forge a bond stronger than any moon-blessed match, could supersede any other claim. But to invoke it, she would have to kiss the king, touch him without permission, risk execution for that crime alone, unless he accepted. Theron took a step closer. His eyes never left hers, and in their silver depths she saw something that made her breath catch. A question. Do you trust me? Seraphina couldn't think. She surged to her feet and ran, not away, toward the king who had ruled alone for more than 3 centuries, toward the alpha whose dominance made the air itself tremble, toward the one wolf in this hall who might be strong enough to protect her from what was coming. She grabbed the front of his formal jacket rising on her toes, and she kissed him. It wasn't gentle, it wasn't romantic. It was pure desperation, survival instinct overriding every lesson in propriety she had ever learned. Her lips crashed against his clumsy and graceless and absolutely terrified. For one frozen heartbeat, Theron went absolutely still. Then his hand came up, steadying her waist, not pushing her away, supporting her. When Seraphina finally pulled back, gasping for air, her whole body shaking, she found herself staring into eyes like molten silver. I invoke the kiss of claiming, she whispered, her voice breaking. By ancient law, a kiss freely given before witnesses creates a bond that supersedes all others, even those decreed by the moon goddess herself. The words tumbled out, half-remembered from childhood stories. Tales of desperate wolves and impossible choices and laws so old even the councils had forgotten them. Theron's expression was unreadable. His hand remained on her waist, warm and solid and grounding. The entire hall held its breath. Then the Alpha King spoke 3 words that shattered everything. I accept the claim. His voice was soft, but it carried to every corner of the vast chamber. Chaos erupted like a dam breaking. Nobles surged to their feet, voices overlapping in outrage and disbelief. Council members shouted about tradition and blasphemy. Warriors reached for weapons they couldn't draw in the king's presence. And across the hall, standing near the altar, where moments ago he had expected to claim his mate, Kaelin Shadowthorn's handsome face contorted with pure rage. She is mine, his roar cut through the noise. The moon goddess chose me. The mark is on her shoulder. The ceremony was moments from completion. The kiss of claiming supersedes moon bonds. Theron's voice was quiet, but something in his tone made every wolf in the hall freeze. It is law, ancient law that even I cannot overturn. He hadn't moved, hadn't pushed Seraphina away. If anything, his hand had settled more firmly on her waist. Protective, possessive. It is law, he repeated. Malachar stepped forward, his face pale with barely controlled fury. Your Majesty, with all due respect, you cannot simply... I can. 2 words, final as a grave. And I have. Grimwald slammed his staff against the marble floor, the sharp crack echoing. This is madness. The girl bears Lord Kaelin's mark. The bond was sanctified by the goddess herself 3 days ago. For the king to interfere... I didn't interfere. Theron's tone left no room for argument. Lady Seraphina invoked ancient law. I accepted. That is not interference. That is honoring tradition far older than moon bonds. Tradition that hasn't been invoked in over 2 centuries. Malachar's control was slipping. Your Majesty, the girl clearly doesn't understand what she's done. The kiss of claiming creates obligations, expectations. She's frightened, confused. I understand perfectly. Seraphina's voice was steadier now. She lifted her chin, meeting the Lord's cold gaze across the hall. Every eye turned to her. Theron's hand tightened almost imperceptibly on her waist. A silent message. I've got you. Speak. I understand, she said again louder. I choose King Theron. I choose this claim. You don't get to choose, Kaelin snarled, starting forward. The moon goddess chose me. You bear my mark. You are mine by divine right. The moon goddess gave us free will. Theron's voice dropped to something dangerous. Or have you forgotten that in your eagerness to claim what you believe is yours, Lord Kaelin? The temperature in the hall seemed to drop 10 degrees. Kaelin stopped in his tracks, muscles tensed as if preparing to attack. But even his rage couldn't overcome centuries of instinct. Theron was the Alpha King. To attack him was to invite death. Grimwald raised his staff again, desperate to regain control. The council demands an investigation. If Lady Seraphina used her empath abilities to manipulate the king's emotions to cloud his judgment, are you suggesting, Theron interrupted softly, that I am weak-minded enough to be manipulated by a terrified Omega? Of course not, Your Majesty. But then there is nothing to investigate. Theron's silver eyes swept the council members. The claiming kiss is valid. Lady Seraphina is under my protection. The previous bond claim is dissolved. He paused, letting the words sink in. This matter is settled. Settled. Malakar's laugh was harsh. Your Majesty, you cannot simply. I am the Alpha King. Steel ran beneath the quiet words. I have ruled these lands for 333 years. I survived the Great War, the Silver Plague, 4 separate attempts on my throne. I did not endure all of that by being weak or indecisive. His gaze fixed on Malakar with predatory focus. So when I say the matter is settled, Lord Shadowthorn, it is settled. Unless you wish to challenge my authority directly. The hall went silent. Challenging the king was treason, punishable by death. Malakar's jaw worked, fury and calculation warring across his features. Finally, he bowed stiffly. Of course not, Your Majesty. Good. Theron looked at Grimwald. This council is dismissed. As the nobles began filing out in various states of outrage and whispered speculation, as council members gathered in furious clusters, as Kaelin stood frozen with barely contained violence, Seraphina allowed herself to truly look at the man who had just claimed her. King Theron Nightshade was younger looking than the stories suggested. His face was unlined, despite his centuries, all sharp angles and controlled strength. Dark hair touched his shoulders longer than was fashionable. And those eyes, silver like moonlight on water, ancient and knowing and utterly focused on her. Thank you, she whispered. Something flickered in his expression, almost like pain. Don't thank me yet, Lady Seraphina. You've just made an enemy of one of the most powerful houses in the kingdom. I know. Her voice dropped even lower. But he's worse than anyone realizes. Theron's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. Explain. Seraphina opened her mouth, then closed it. The hall was still clearing, dozens of ears still close enough to hear. She shook her head minutely. Theron understood immediately. He turned, offering her his arm with formal courtesy that belied the chaos of the last few minutes. Come, he said. We have much to discuss. As he led her through corridors she had never seen before, passages reserved for royalty, where even the air felt different, heavier with history and power. Seraphina's mind finally caught up with what she had done. She had kissed the Alpha King, the wolf who had ruled alone for more than 3 centuries, the most powerful alpha in all the territories, and he had accepted her claim. She was under his protection now. But for how long and at what cost? They emerged into a private study lined with ancient books and battle maps. Moonlight streamed through tall windows, painting everything in silver. The room smelled of old leather and pine smoke. Theron finally released her arm, moving to pour water from a crystal decanter. Sit, he said, gesturing to a cushioned chair near the fireplace. Before you collapse. Seraphina's legs chose that moment to remind her they existed. She sank into the chair, her hands shaking so badly she had to clasp them together in her lap. When Theron handed her the water, their fingers brushed. The contact sent a jolt through her empath gift like lightning striking stone. She gasped, nearly dropping the glass. In that brief moment of skin against skin, she felt him, really felt him. Centuries of loneliness pressed down like armor he could never remove. Duty layered upon duty until the man beneath had almost forgotten how to exist without the weight. Curiosity warring with caution. And underneath it all, bone-deep exhaustion. He was so tired. Seraphina pulled back quickly, clutching the glass with both hands. I'm sorry. I didn't mean. You're an empath, not a question, a statement. She nodded slowly. I try not to use it, try not to invade people's privacy, but sometimes when there's direct contact, I can't help it. How much did you feel wrong? The gentleness in his voice surprised her. She had expected anger violation. Instead, he sounded almost curious. Enough, she whispered. Enough to know that you are very tired and very lonely. Theron pulled a chair opposite her, sitting with the unconscious grace of a predator. How did you know to invoke the claiming kiss? My grandmother told me stories when I was young, about the old laws, the ones that existed before the moon goddess formalized the bonding process. Seraphina took a sip of water, trying to steady her racing heart. She said there was a time when wolves chose their mates freely, when a kiss given in front of witnesses was more binding than any moon mark. Your grandmother was a wise woman. Theron leaned forward slightly, silver eyes intent. And she was right. The claiming kiss predates moon bonds by millennia. But Serafina, you need to understand what you've done, what we've done. I know it's caused problems. It's caused a political crisis. His voice remained gentle despite the words. House Shadowthorn is one of the most powerful families in the kingdom. They control half the military territories. Kalen was their heir, and you were his moon-chosen mate. By accepting your claim, I've insulted them publicly, made them look weak. Serafina's hands tightened on the glass. I can dissolve the claim. Tell them it was a mistake. Let Kalen know. The single word was absolute. That's not what I'm saying. He sat back, running a hand through his dark hair in a gesture that made him look suddenly younger. Less like an ancient king and more like a man dealing with an impossible situation. I'm saying that we need to be smart about this. Careful, because Kalen Shadowthorn will not let this go. He'll look for any way to invalidate the claim to prove you manipulated me to force its dissolution. Then I'll be ready, Serafina said, lifting her chin. I won't go back to him. I can't. Why, Brabanda? Theron's gaze sharpened. You mentioned murder, crimes. Explain. So she did. She told him about gathering moonflowers in the forest 2 weeks ago, about stumbling upon Isabella Fairborn's body at the base of the cliffs, about how her empath gift had activated when she touched the cooling skin, flooding her with the dead woman's final moments. I saw him, Serafina whispered, her voice breaking. In Isabella's last thoughts, Kalen pushing her, watching her fall. I felt her confusion, her disbelief that the man chosen for her by the goddess would be the one to murder her. Theron had gone very still. Did you report this to whom? Serafina's laugh was bitter. Kalen is Lord Shadowthorn's heir, the council's favorite. Who would believe an empath's testimony over his word, especially when the official investigation ruled it an accident? I would believe you. The simple statement, spoken with such certainty, made her eyes burn with tears she refused to shed. Why, she asked. You don't know me. For all you know, I could be lying, making up stories to escape an unwanted match. You could be. Theron's silver eyes never left hers. But I don't think you are. How can you be sure? Call it instinct. Call it 3 centuries of reading people. Call it the fact that you're terrified of me discovering you're telling the truth, not terrified of me discovering you're lying. He leaned forward again, and Serafina caught his scent properly for the first time. Cedar and night air, and something wild that made her wolf stir despite everything. Serafina, I need you to understand something. The claiming kiss is binding. But it's not a full mate bond, not yet. It's a promise, an intention. Under the old laws, it can be dissolved by mutual agreement within a lunar cycle if both parties wish it. Her heart sank. You want to dissolve it? I didn't say that. His voice was sharp. I'm giving you information, choices. Something it seems you've had precious few of lately. He paused, searching her face. I don't want to dissolve it. Not if it means Kalen can reclaim you. But you need to know what you've committed to. You've claimed the AlphaKing. Every wolf in this kingdom will have an opinion about it. Every noble family will see it as political maneuvering. And Kalen will try to destroy me. Serafina finished the thought. Yes, I know. Then why risk it? Theron asked quietly. Why invoke the claiming kiss at all? You could have accepted execution. It would have been quicker than what's coming. Serafina met his ancient gaze steadily. Because I refuse to let him win. Because Isabella deserves justice. Because if I die, he'll just move on to his next victim. She took a shaky breath, and because when I looked at you, I saw something I didn't see in anyone else in that hall. What? A chance, maybe the only one I'll ever get. Something shifted in Theron's expression. Respect, perhaps. He stood, offering his hand. Come, I'll show you to your chambers. You'll stay in the royal wing under my personal protection. When Serafina took his hand, the empath contact flared again. But this time, underneath the duty and loneliness, she felt something else. Determination. He was going to help her. Really help her. Theron, she said as they walked through quiet corridors lit by moonlight. Why are you doing this? You could have refused the claim. Let the council sort it out. Why risk your relationship with House Shadowthorn for someone you don't even know? He was quiet for so long, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then softly, because 333 years is a long time to watch wolves be forced into bonds they don't want. A long time to see the damage it causes, the lives it destroys. He glanced at her. And because when you kissed me, I felt something I haven't felt in decades. What? Hope. His voice was barely a whisper. Hope that maybe, just maybe, something could change. They stopped outside an ornate door guarded by two of Theron's personal warriors. He instructed them that absolutely no one was to enter without his direct permission. Then he turned to Seraphina. Rest. Tomorrow we'll begin gathering evidence against Kaelin. Together. Together, Seraphina repeated the word, feeling strange and wonderful in her mouth. As she stepped into the lavish chambers, she turned back. Thank you for believing me, for protecting me, for accepting a desperate kiss from a terrified Omega who had nowhere else to run. Theron's lips quirked in something that wasn't quite a smile. You're welcome, Seraphina. Sleep well. But as the door closed between them, Seraphina knew sleep would be impossible, because somewhere in the palace, Kaelin Shadowthorn was plotting his revenge, and she had just painted a target on both herself and the king who had chosen to protect her. Tomorrow, the real battle would begin, but tonight, for the first time in weeks, Seraphina felt something other than terror. She felt hope, and in the darkness of her borrowed chambers, she touched her fingers to her lips, remembering the moment everything changed. The kiss that saved her life. The kiss that bound her to a king. The kiss that would either destroy them both or forge them into something stronger than any bond the moon goddess had ever decreed. Only time would tell which. Dawn came too quickly. Seraphina stood before the mirror in her borrowed chambers, barely recognizing the woman staring back. The palace attendants had brought formal gowns, sapphire silk that matched the royal colors. Her dark hair was arranged in an intricate braid. She looked like she belonged in this world of power and politics. She felt like an imposter about to be exposed. The moon mark on her shoulder burned, Kaelin's brand. Even with Theron's claims superseding it, the crescent moon remained a constant reminder of the bond she had rejected. She traced it with trembling fingers, feeling the raised skin. A soft knock preceded Theron's entrance. He had traded his ceremonial attire for formal council clothes, black and silver that made his eyes seem even more luminous in the morning light. Those ancient silver eyes swept over her with an assessing look that made her breath catch. You look like a queen, he said quietly. I'm not a queen, I'm barely even... You're under my protection. His voice was firm. By law, that makes you untouchable. But the council will try every trick they know to invalidate our claim. Kaelin will have spent the night gathering allies building his case. He moved closer and Seraphina caught that scent again. Cedar and night air and wilderness. What should I do? Stand beside me, say nothing unless directly addressed. And whatever happens, his hand reached out, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear with unexpected gentleness. Don't let them see you're afraid. The casual intimacy of the gesture surprised them both. Theron's hand lingered for just a moment before he pulled back, clearing his throat. Ready? No. She would never be ready. But she nodded anyway. The council chamber was already full when they arrived. 8 council members sat in a semicircle, their expressions ranging from stern disapproval to barely concealed hostility. Kaelin stood off to the side with his father, Lord Malachar. The older man's cold eyes promised retribution. And seated in the gallery were dozens of noble families, all eager to witness the spectacle. Theron led Seraphina to the center of the chamber, positioning her slightly behind him. Protective without being possessive. His presence at her back felt like a shield. This council convenes, Counselor Grimwald announced, his voice echoing off stone walls, to address the unprecedented events of last night's ceremony. There's nothing to address. Theron's tone was calm as still water. The kiss of claiming was witnessed by the entire court. The law is clear. The law, Counselor Thane interjected, a thin man with calculating eyes, was designed for different circumstances. Not for frightened girls making impulsive decisions to escape their divine destiny. My son was chosen by the moon goddess herself. Malachar's voice carried gravitas, practiced and perfect. Lord Kaelin bore her mark. The bond was sanctified. For the king to interfere, I didn't interfere. Theron's tone sharpened like a blade being drawn. Lady Seraphina invoked ancient law. I accepted. That is not interference. That is honoring tradition far older than moon bonds. Tradition that hasn't been invoked in over 2 centuries. Grimwald slammed his staff against marble. The sharp crack made several nobles flinch. Your Majesty, with respect, the girl clearly doesn't understand what she's done. The kiss of claiming creates obligations. Expectations. She's young, sheltered. I understand perfectly. Seraphina's voice cut through the chamber. Every eye turned to her. Theron's hand moved almost imperceptibly, his knuckles brushing against hers in silent support. She drew strength from that tiny contact. Then explain, child, Malachar said, with false gentleness. Why would you insult Lord Kaelin, a worthy maid of noble blood, by throwing yourself at the king? The trap was obvious. Any answer would sound either foolish or calculated. Because I choose autonomy over destiny, Seraphina said carefully. And King Theron represents a choice made freely, not a fate imposed upon me. Pretty words? Kalen spoke for the first time, his voice smooth as silk over steel. But we all know the truth, don't we? You're using the king as a shield because you're afraid. Afraid of a real bond. Afraid of the intimacy and surrender that a true mate requires. I'm not afraid of intimacy. Seraphina met his gaze directly, remembering Isabella's terror in those final moments. I'm afraid of cruelty disguised as destiny. The chamber went silent. Kalen's expression darkened. You dare accuse me? I accuse no one, Seraphina said quickly, but her voice remained steady. I simply state that I felt no connection to you, Lord Kalen. No warmth, no safety. And when I looked into my future as your mate, all I saw was... She stopped choosing words carefully. Darkness. Your gift, Thane said, suddenly leaning forward. You're an empath. You sensed Lord Kalen's emotions and found them lacking. Another trap. If she said yes, she'd be admitting she judged Kalen based on feelings rather than logic. If she said no, her entire justification crumbled. I sensed enough to know I would not survive that bond, she said quietly. Not as myself. Dramatic nonsense. Malachar scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. Your Majesty, surely you see this for what it is. A sheltered girl having cold feet using ancient lore to escape responsibility. What I see, Theron said, his voice dropping to something dangerous that made the temperature seem to fall, is a woman exercising her right to choose. Something this council seems to have forgotten is her right. Rights must be balanced against duty, Thane argued. Must they? Theron stepped forward. The counselors instinctively leaned back. Tell me, Counselor Thane, how many Omegas have petitioned this council for bond dissolutions in the past decade? Thane shifted uncomfortably. That's not relevant. 47? Theron continued as if the counselor hadn't spoken. 47 petitions. Do you know how many were granted? Silence. None, Theron said softly. Not one, Mom, because this council believes duty supersedes happiness. Tradition supersedes choice. Divine will supersedes free will. His silver eyes swept across them all, ancient and merciless. I'm beginning to think this council has forgotten what leadership actually means. Your Majesty, Grimwald said stiffly, we do not question your judgment, but the girl's actions last night were impulsive, emotional, and legally binding. Theron's tone left no room for argument. The kiss of claiming stands. Kalen moved forward, his careful composure finally cracking. This is absurd, she bears my mark. The moon goddess chose me for her. You cannot simply... He reached for Seraphina, his hand shooting out to grab her arm. To show the mark. To prove his claim. Theron moved faster. One moment Kalen was reaching. The next Theron's hand had caught his wrist midair, his grip like iron. The king's eyes flashed with something primal, something that made even the council members shift in their seats. Touch her, Theron said quietly, and you'll lose that hand. The threat hung in the air. Not melodramatic. Stated with such calm certainty that no one doubted he meant it. Kalen yanked his hand back, his face flushed with rage and humiliation. Malachar placed a restraining hand on his son's shoulder. When he spoke, his voice was ice. This matter is not settled. We invoke the right of investigation. If the girl's claim is found to be based on false pretenses or manipulation, investigate all you want, Theron interrupted. You'll find nothing but a woman exercising her legal rights. He turned to Seraphina, his voice softening. Come. We're done here. As they left the council chamber, Seraphina felt Kalen's gaze boring into her back. Cold, calculating, promising retribution. But she also felt Theron's hand steady at the small of her back, a reminder she wasn't alone. That went better than expected, Theron murmured once they were in the corridor. He threatened you. Seraphina's voice shook slightly. I know. Theron's jaw tightened. And now I know he's desperate. Desperate people make mistakes. Or they get dangerous. That too. He glanced at her, something warm flickering in those ancient eyes. Which is why you're not leaving my sight until we figure out exactly what Kalen Shadowthorn is hiding. They walked through palace gardens where early morning light turned dew to diamonds on rose petals. Other nobles passed their stares sharp as knives. Whispers followed in their wake. The broken Omega and the lonely king. What a scandal. A woman stepped into their path. Beautiful with golden hair and eyes like amber. She wore a gown of deep crimson cut to emphasize curves and confidence. Lysandra Starweaver, one of the highest-ranking beta females in the kingdom. and someone who had clearly expected to become queen. Your Majesty, her curtsy was perfect, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. And Lady Seraphina, how unexpected to see you still here. Lady Lysandra, Theron's tone was polite but cold. Then, is there something you need? Only to offer my congratulations. Lysandra's gaze raked over Seraphina like she was evaluating livestock. Though I must confess I'm surprised. I didn't realize the king's tastes ran toward broken things. The insult landed like a slap. Seraphina felt her cheeks burn, but before she could respond, Theron stepped between them. Careful, Lady Lysandra. His voice was soft, lethal. You're dangerously close to insulting someone under my personal protection. I meant no offense, Your Majesty. Lysandra's smile turned sharp. I'm merely concerned. Surely you can see that this girl is using you. An empath desperate enough to manipulate your emotions to make you think you want her, when really what? Theron's eyes flashed silver fire. When really I'm too old and experienced to know my own mind. When really I'm so desperate for companionship that I'd let myself be manipulated by a terrified Omega. Lysandra's confidence faltered. Of course not. I only meant, you meant to question my judgment while insulting Lady Seraphina. Theron's voice could have frozen fire. Let me be abundantly clear. She is under my protection. Any insult to her is an insult to me, and I do not tolerate insults to my authority. He leaned closer, voice dropping. Am I understood? Lysandra went pale. She curtsied again, deeper this time. Perfectly, Your Majesty. When she walked away, her spine was rigid with fury. You didn't have to do that, Seraphina whispered. Yes, I did. Theron resumed walking, but she caught the tension in his shoulders. Lysandra Starweaver is ambitious and calculating. She expected to become queen when I finally chose a mate. Your claim threatens those ambitions. Will she cause trouble? Undoubtedly. He guided her toward a private section of the gardens away from prying eyes. But right now we have bigger problems. They sat on a stone bench beneath an ancient oak. Birds sang in branches overhead. For a moment it felt almost peaceful. Then Theron spoke. Tell me everything you remember about finding Isabella. Every detail. So Seraphina did. She described the Moonflower clearing. The way Isabella's body had looked broken at the base of the cliffs. The vision that flooded her when she touched cold skin. But there was something else, she said, slowly remembering. In Isabella's final thoughts. She was thinking about letters, evidence she'd found. She threatened to expose Kaelin unless he released her from the bond. Evidence of what? I don't know. The vision wasn't clear on details. But Isabella thought it was damning enough that Kaelin would rather commit murder than let it come to light. Theron was quiet for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. When he finally spoke, his voice was careful. Seraphina, I need to tell you something, and you need to understand how serious this is. Her heart stuttered. What? 2 weeks ago, Captain Aldrich brought me a report, an inquiry into Isabella's death. The official ruling was accidental, but Aldrich found inconsistencies. Bruising that didn't match a simple fall. Defensive wounds. You knew, Seraphina breathed. You knew something was wrong before I invoked the claiming kiss. I suspected. Theron met her eyes. But I had no proof. Empath visions aren't admissible in formal charges. And investigating a High Lord's son without evidence would have caused exactly the kind of political crisis we're dealing with now. So when I kissed you, I saw an opportunity. He didn't look away, didn't try to soften it. A legitimate reason to keep you safe while we investigate. To protect you from a man I suspected was dangerous. Seraphina should have felt used, manipulated, but all she felt was a strange warmth in her chest. You believed me, she whispered. Before you even knew me, you believed something was wrong. And I still do. Theron's hand found hers on the bench. The touch sent warmth through her entire body. Which is why we need to find that evidence. The letters Isabella mentioned. Financial records. Anything that proves Kaelin is more than just a murderer. You think he's done this before? I think men who kill that easily have practice. Theron's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand, probably unconscious. And I think Isabella wasn't his first victim. They spent the next 3 days searching. Captain Aldrich, a grizzled warrior with kind eyes and absolute loyalty to Theron, joined their investigation. He brought records from the archives. Deaths over the past 2 decades. Omegas connected to House Shadowthorn who had died under suspicious circumstances. The study where they worked became a war room. Maps covered one wall, documents spread across tables, and with each piece of evidence, they uncovered the pattern became clearer, more terrible. 4, Aldrich said, on the third evening, his voice heavy. 4 Omegas connected to Kalen, all dead before bonding could be completed. Serafina stared at the names written in Aldrich's careful hand. Violet Moonspire, died in a house fire, 20 years ago. Celeste Thornhart, drowned while swimming, 15 years ago. Arya Windwhisper, fell from her horse during a hunt, 8 years ago. Isabella Fairborn, fell from the cliffs, 2 weeks ago. All ruled accidents, Theron said quietly, standing before the wall of evidence. All investigated by Counselor Grimwald. That was the damning part. Every investigation. Every ruling of accidental death, all conducted by the same corrupt counselor. He's been covering for Kalen for decades, Serafina whispered. The question is why, Aldrich said. What does Grimwald gain from protecting a serial killer? Power. Theron's voice was hard. Malachar is one of the wealthiest lords in the kingdom. If Grimwald is in his pocket, a sharp knock interrupted them. One of Theron's guards entered, his expression grim. Your Majesty, Counselor Grimwald has fled the palace, and he's taken evidence with him. The bottom dropped out of Serafina's stomach. What evidence? Theron's voice was deadly calm. The financial records Captain Aldrich requested from the royal treasury. Documents showing transactions between House Shadowthorn and enemy territories. All gone. Aldrich cursed. That proves the treason. The selling of military secrets Isabella discovered. And now we can't prove anything, Serafina said, her voice breaking. Without those records, we're back to empath visions and suspicions. Theron's hands curled into fists. Nothing admissible in formal charges. The guards shifted uncomfortably. There's more, Your Majesty. Lord Malachar has made a formal declaration to the council. He invokes the right of blood price. What does that mean? Serafina asked, though she already knew it couldn't be good. Theron's jaw tightened. It means House Shadowthorn demands compensation for the insult I've caused by accepting your claim. Traditionally, compensation takes one of 3 forms. Gold territory, or the return of the claimed Omega to her original match, Aldrich finished quietly. Serafina felt the walls closing in. They can force you to give me back to Kalen, not force. Theron turned to her, and in his ancient eyes she saw fury and something that looked like fear. But if I refuse all 3 options, it's grounds for declaring me an unfit king. The council would fracture. Half the kingdom would side with Shadowthorn. We'd have civil war. Then give them gold, territory, whatever they want. Malachar won't accept. Theron's voice was bitter. This isn't about compensation, it's about humiliation. About proving that even the Alpha King can't protect you. There's a 4th option, the guard said reluctantly. Lord Kalen has issued a formal challenge. Trial by combat, for the right to reclaim his mate. The words landed like stones in deep water. Trial by combat, the oldest, most brutal form of justice among wolves. 2 fighters, 1 arena. Battle until submission, incapacitation, or death. Winner takes all. Winslow. Theron's voice was flat. Tomorrow night, full moon. The guard swallowed hard. If you refuse, Your Majesty, they'll claim you're unfit to hold your claim on Lady Serafina. The kiss of claiming will be dissolved, and Kalen's original bond will be reinstated by default. Meaning if Theron didn't fight, Serafina would be handed back to a murderer. And if he fought and lost, she'd be handed to a murderer over his corpse. Tell them I accept, Theron said quietly. No. Serafina grabbed his arm. You can't. Kalen is young fast. And I have survived 333 years of battles. Theron's hand covered hers. I'm not losing you, Serafina. But as the guard left and Aldrich began planning strategy, Serafina felt terror wrap around her heart. Because tomorrow night, under a full moon, one of them would die. And she couldn't bear to lose either herself or the king who had become something more than just her protector. The moon hung heavy in the night sky. Tomorrow it would witness blood. Serafina found Theron in the training courtyard long after midnight. He moved through combat forms with deadly precision, each strike controlled and lethal. Sweat gleamed on his skin despite the cool air. A reminder that beneath the king's diplomacy lived a warrior who had survived centuries of war. You should be resting, she said softly. He didn't stop moving, didn't break the rhythm of his practice. I've rested enough. Theron. He finally stopped, turning to face her. His chest heaved. Silver eyes blazed in the moonlight. He's younger than me, Theron said between breaths. Faster, trained specifically for combat, while I've spent decades in council chambers managing politics. Another strike against invisible enemies. The odds aren't in my favor. Then don't fight. Serafina moved closer. Dissolve the claim. Let me face Kalen alone. I'll find another way to... No. The single word was absolute. He crossed to her and she saw it then, not just determination, desperation. You're not going back to him, Theron said. Not while I breathe. That's exactly what I'm afraid of. Her voice broke. That you'll stop breathing because of me. I'm not going to. You don't know that. I do. His hands came up, cupping her face with a gentleness that stole her breath. Because losing means you die, and I won't let that happen. The raw honesty in his voice made her eyes burn with tears. Why, she whispered. Why risk everything for someone you barely know? Because you're not just someone. His thumbs traced her cheekbones. You're the first person in centuries who looked at me and saw past the crown. Who touched me and felt the truth I hide from everyone else. His voice roughened with emotion. Because when you kissed me desperate and terrified, something in me woke up. Something I thought had died long ago. What? Serafina's hands came up to cover his. Hope. The word was barely a whisper. Hope that maybe I could have something beyond duty. Beyond obligation. His forehead touched hers. That maybe I could choose something. Someone. For myself. Through her empath gifts, Serafina felt the truth of his words. The loneliness that had shaped him for centuries. The bone-deep exhaustion of always being the king, never just Theron. The desperate yearning for connection he'd buried so deep he'd almost forgotten it existed. Until she'd kissed him. I'm scared, she admitted. Of losing you. Of what happens if Kalen wins. Of... Her voice broke. Of how much I've come to care about you in just 3 days. 3 days. Theron's lips curved in something between a smile and a grimace. Such a short time to turn a world upside down. Is that what I've done? Completely. His thumb traced her bottom lip, and she felt him tremble. The Alpha King who swore he'd never take a mate, who spent centuries alone, who convinced himself he didn't need anyone. He pulled back enough to meet her eyes. And then you ran into my hall and kissed me like I was your last hope. You were. I know. His expression softened. But Serafina, you became mine too, my hope. My reason to fight tomorrow night with everything I have. She reached up her fingers, threading through his dark hair, pulling him closer. Then promise me something. Anything. Survive. Her voice trembled. Come back to me. Because I don't want this to end before it begins. It won't. The certainty in his voice steadied her. I've survived 3 centuries of battles, Serafina. I'm not losing to an arrogant boy who thinks power means brutality. He'll fight dirty. I'm counting on it. Theron's smile was sharp. Dirty fighters are predictable. They rely on tricks because they lack true skill. And you have true skill. I have 333 years of experience. His head lowered until their lips nearly touched. And I have something Kalen will never have. What? The word was barely a breath. A reason to win that goes beyond pride. Then he kissed her. Not the desperate survival kiss from the hall, not a gentle exploration. This was claiming. Passionate. Real. A kiss that tasted of promise and fear, and something that felt dangerously close to love. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Theron rested his forehead against hers. Whatever happens tomorrow, he whispered, know this, you saved me before I saved you. How pushing, by reminding me what it feels like to want something beyond duty. His arms tightened around her. By making me remember I'm not just a king. His voice dropped even lower. I'm a man, and this man is choosing you. Tomorrow. Always. Serafina buried her face in his chest, feeling his heartbeat strong and steady. Then fight like hell to keep me. I will. His lips pressed against her hair. I promise you, Serafina, I will. But as the full moon rose higher, casting silver light across the courtyard, both of them knew that promises and determination might not be enough. Tomorrow only one would leave the arena alive, and Kalen Shadowthorn had never lost a fight. The combat arena was ancient, a circle of white stone that had witnessed countless battles under countless moons. Serafina stood in the royal box flanked by guards Theron had personally assigned. Below the arena floor gleamed silver in the moonlight. Hundreds of wolves filled the surrounding seats. Nobles, warriors, common folk, all gathered to watch their king fight for a woman he'd known mere days. The air hummed with anticipation and bloodlust. Captain Aldrich stood beside her, his expression grim. This is madness. Trial by combat hasn't been invoked in over a century. Kalen knew exactly what he was doing, Serafina said quietly. If Theron refused, he'd look weak. If Theron loses, she couldn't finish the sentence. Horns blared, silencing the crowd. Counselor Thane stepped into the arena's center, his voice magically amplified. By ancient law and council decree, we gather to witness trial by combat. Lord Kaelin Shadowthorn challenges King Theron Nightshade for the right to claim Lady Seraphina Moonwhisper. Kaelin entered from the east gate. The crowd roared. He was magnificent in his combat leathers, golden hair gleaming, moving with the confidence of someone who'd never lost. His eyes found Seraphina in the royal box, and his smile was pure predator. "You're already mine," that smile said. "And when I win, you'll pay for every humiliation." Then Theron entered from the west gate. The roar became deafening. He wore simple black, no armor, no ceremonial decoration, just lethal simplicity. But the way he moved, fluid, controlled, absolutely certain, made even Kaelin's swagger look like posturing. Their eyes met across the arena. Theron's gaze flickered up to Seraphina for just a moment. In that glance, she felt everything he couldn't say. "Trust me, I've got this. Wait for me." "The rules," Thane announced. "Combat continues until submission, incapacitation, or death. Shifting is permitted. Weapons are not. The winner claims both victory and the lady." He paused dramatically. "May the moon goddess guide the worthy." He retreated to the edge of the arena. For 3 heartbeats, neither fighter moved. Then Kaelin attacked. He was fast, blindingly fast. His fist shot toward Theron's face with precision born from years of brutal training. But Theron wasn't there. He'd moved a fraction of a second before impact, his counterstrike catching Kaelin's ribs with devastating accuracy. Kaelin stumbled back, surprised. "Lucky," he snarled. "Calculated," Theron corrected calmly. They circled each other, and Seraphina realized what Theron was doing. He was analyzing, cataloging every movement, every tell. 3 centuries of perfect memory meant he only needed to seed a pattern once to counter it forever. Kaelin lunged again. This time Theron let him connect. A glancing blow to his shoulder that looked worse than it was. The crowd gasped. Kaelin's smile widened. "You're old, Theron. Slow. This will be easier than I thought." But Seraphina saw the truth through her empath gift even at a distance. Theron had taken that hit deliberately, learning Kaelin's strength, his preferred angles. Every strike was data, every exchange a lesson. He was hunting. The fight intensified. Kaelin shifted partially, claws extending, going for Theron's throat. But Theron shifted too fast or smoother. Suddenly, they were 2 apex predators colliding in a blur of silver and black. The crowd screamed, bloodlust rising with the moon. Kaelin fought like a berserker, all rage and power and brutal efficiency, but Theron fought like time itself. Patient, inevitable, wearing his opponent down with calculated precision. Minutes stretched into eternity. Blood-spattered white stone. Both fighters were wounded now. Kaelin's face bore deep claw marks. Theron's shoulder bled from a vicious bite. But Theron was winning. Seraphina could see it. The way Kaelin's attacks became more desperate, more wild. The way his breathing grew ragged while Theron's remained controlled. Then Kaelin made his mistake. He went for a killing blow, overextending, leaving his left side exposed for a fraction of a second. Theron's claws found the opening, tearing through muscle and sinew. Kaelin screamed. Blood sprayed silver stone. "Yield," Theron commanded, his voice carrying across the arena. "Never." Kaelin lunged again despite his injury. This time Theron caught him mid-strike. His hand closed around Kaelin's throat, lifting the younger wolf off his feet. The message was clear. "I could end you right now. Easily." "Yield," Theron repeated, "or I finish this." Kaelin's eyes darted to his father in the stands, to the council members watching in shock, to Seraphina, and through her gift, even at a distance, she felt his emotions. Not just rage, fear, raw, desperate fear that he was about to die. But something else too, calculation. Even now he was planning. "I yield," Kaelin gasped. The arena erupted into chaos, some cheering, others protesting. But Theron's eyes found only Seraphina. He'd won. He'd survived. Then Kaelin moved. It happened so fast. The blade appearing from nowhere, small and wickedly sharp, poison gleaming on its edge. He struck as Theron released him, the blade sliding between ribs with practiced precision. Theron's eyes went wide, shocked. He looked down at the blade protruding from his side, at the poison already spreading black veins across his skin. "Cheater," he said softly. Then he collapsed. "No." Seraphina's scream tore from her throat. She was running before she knew it, guards trying to stop her failing. She hit the arena floor and ran to where Theron had fallen. Blood pooled beneath him. So much blood. "Theron." She dropped to her knees beside him, her hands going to the wound. No, 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 please. His silver eyes found hers, struggling to focus. Seraphina, he whispered. Run. Then his eyes closed, and the Alpha King who had survived 333 years went still. Seraphina felt her world shatter, felt her empath gift explode outward in a wave of raw grief and rage that made every wolf in the arena stagger. Above her, Kalen laughed. The king is dead, he announced, which means the claim is void. And you, my dear Omega, are mine again. Hands grabbed Seraphina's arms, Kalen's guards, pulling her away from Theron's body. No. She struggled, but they were so much stronger. Let me go. Take her to Shadowthorn Keep, Kalen ordered, wiping blood from his face. It's time my mate learned her place. As they dragged her from the arena, Seraphina looked back at Theron's still form. The king who had protected her, who had believed her, who had kissed her like she was his last hope, dead because of her. The last thing she saw before they threw her into the carriage was Lysandra Starweaver standing beside Malachar, smiling. And Seraphina understood. This had been planned all along. She'd been a fool to think she could win. The dungeons of Shadowthorn Keep smelled of blood and despair. Seraphina hung from chains bolted to stone walls, her wrists raw and bleeding. The silver in the metal burned against her skin, preventing her wolf from surfacing, preventing escape. 3 days had passed since Kalen's blade had pierced Theron's heart. 3 days since the Alpha King had fallen in the arena, his silver eyes going dark as life left his body. 3 days of hell. The door creaked open. Torchlight spilled across damp stone. Kalen entered pristine in his house colors despite the bruises still healing on his face. Behind him came his father, Lord Malachar, moving with the confidence of a man who had just won everything. Good morning, my dear mate, Kalen said, his voice a mockery of tenderness. I trust you slept well. Seraphina didn't answer. Couldn't. Her throat was raw from screaming the first night when they'd used heated silver to burn away Theron's claiming mark. The skin on her shoulder was blistered, oozing. But the mark remained faint and scarred, refusing to fully disappear. Even in death, Theron protected her. Malachar stepped closer, studying her with clinical interest. Remarkable. 3 days of silver poisoning and she still hasn't broken. Most Omegas would be begging by now. She's not most Omegas, Kalen said, trailing a finger down her cheek. Seraphina flinched away. That's what makes her so valuable. Indeed, Malachar's cold eyes gleamed. Tell me, girl, do you know why you survived Isabella's fate? Why my son didn't simply push you off a cliff like the others? Seraphina's gaze snapped to his face. He smiled. Ah, yes. We know you discovered the truth about Isabella, about Violet and Celeste and Arya, all those inconvenient Omegas who asked too many questions or threatened to expose secrets. He circled her like a predator evaluating prey. But you, Seraphina Moonwhisper, are different. Because I have empath abilities. Her voice came out as a rasp. Because you have ancient blood. The words hung in the fetid air. Malachar pulled a worn book from his coat. Ancient leather binding pages yellowed with age. Your grandmother was very careful to hide it, changed her name, moved to the outer territories, raised her children in obscurity. He opened the book to a marked page. But I found the records, the lineage that traces back to the moon goddess's first children, the original Omegas who walked beside the first Alphas. Seraphina's blood ran cold. When the moon mark appeared on you, Malachar continued, I had my suspicions. Ancient bloodlines often manifest unique gifts. Your empath ability isn't common. It's divine. His smile was cruel. And when you absorbed poison from the king during the combat to save his life, you confirmed it. I didn't. Oh, but you did. Kalen laughed. We were watching. Saw how the silver spread from Theron to you when you touched him. Saw how you pulled it into yourself. He leaned close, breath hot against her ear. Only ancient Omegas can purify toxins through contact. Malachar closed the book with a sharp snap, which is why you're far too valuable to simply kill. When you bond with Kalen, when your bloodlines combine, the child you produce will be extraordinary, powerful beyond measure. I'll never bond with him, Seraphina spat. I'd rather die. You don't have that option anymore. Malachar's voice turned icy. The king is dead. Your protector is ash and memory. And every wolf in this kingdom believes you manipulated him with your empath tricks. No one is coming to save you. The words were meant to break her. And oh, how they hurt. Because Theron was dead, she'd felt it. Felt his heart stop beneath her hands. Felt the life drain from those ancient silver eyes that had looked at her with such warmth. He had died protecting her. And now she was alone. 3 more days, Malachar said, turning toward the door. Three days to let the silver weaken her resistance. Then we'll perform the bonding ritual whether she consents or not. What about Lysandra? Kaelin asked. She's getting impatient. Lady Starweaver will be compensated for her assistance. Malakar's smile was thin. Once you're bonded and the Omega is pregnant, you can take as many mistresses as you please. Lysandra will make an excellent one. They left their laughter echoing off stone walls. Seraphina sagged in her chains, tears finally breaking free. She'd been strong for 3 days. Hadn't cried, hadn't begged. But now alone in the darkness, grief crashed over her like a tidal wave. Theron was dead. The king who had believed her, protected her, kissed her like she was his salvation. Gone. A soft sound made her look up. In the corner of the cell, partially hidden by shadow, someone moved. Who's there? Seraphina's voice cracked. A young woman crawled forward into the dim light. She was thin, haunted-looking, with dark hair matted with filth, but her eyes were sharp, aware. "My name is Mira," she whispered. "I was Lady Isabella's maid." "You're alive," Seraphina breathed. "They said you'd run away." "They lied." Mira's voice was barely audible. "Lord Malakar's men took me the night Isabella died. I saw everything, heard everything. They couldn't let me testify." She crawled closer and Seraphina saw the scars. Burns, cuts, evidence of torture far worse than what Seraphina had endured. "They tried to break me," Mira continued. "Tried to make me forget what I saw. But I remembered. Always remembered." Her eyes gleamed with unshed tears. "Lady Isabella was kind to me. She didn't deserve what happened." "None of them did," Seraphina said. "How many others are down here?" "Just us now, the others who knew too much." Mira's voice broke. "They didn't survive." Silence settled between them, heavy with grief and rage. "They're going to force me to bond with Kaelin in 3 days," Seraphina said finally. "I can't let that happen. I can't. Then we escape. How I'm chained with Silver. You're too weak. We're in the heart of Shadowthorn Keep with hundreds of guards." "You're not alone." The voice came from the cell door. Both women's heads snapped toward the sound. A figure stood in the doorway backlit by torchlight. Tall, powerful, moving with predatory grace. Seraphina's heart stopped. Theron. The name was a prayer, a question, an impossible hope. He stepped into the cell and moonlight from the high window caught his face. Silver eyes blazed in the darkness. "Hello, Seraphina," he said softly. "Did you really think I'd leave you?" She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. "You died. I felt you die. You felt what we wanted you to feel." He moved toward her, and she saw that he wasn't alone. Captain Aldrich emerged from the shadows along with 20 warriors in black. The poison blade was real, but Captain Aldrich had prepared an antidote. The death, his lips curved in something that wasn't quite a smile, was performance. "You let me think," rage and relief warred in her chest. "You let me believe you were dead." "I'm sorry." And he did look sorry, genuinely grieved. "But we needed Malakar to reveal himself. Needed him confident enough to bring you here to his stronghold where all the evidence of his crimes would be kept." He reached up and silver light glowed from his hands. The chains holding Seraphina melted away like ice in summer. She collapsed forward. Theron caught her, gathering her against his chest with a tenderness that made her throat close. "I'm sorry," he whispered into her hair. "I'm so sorry. But I had to protect you. And the only way to do that was to make them think they'd won." Through her empath gift, Seraphina felt his anguish. He'd known what those 3 days would do to her, had hated every moment of it. But he'd endured because it was the only way. "You're real," she whispered, her hands fisting in his shirt. "You're really here." "I'm here, and I'm getting you out." He pulled back his eyes, scanning the burns on her shoulder, the wounds on her wrists. Fury blazed across his features. "What did they do to you?" "Tried to burn away your mark." Her voice was stronger now. "It didn't work." Something fierce and possessive flashed in his eyes. "It never will." He turned to Aldrich. "Get Mira to the healers. Seraphina comes with me." "Where?" Seraphina asked as he lifted her into his arms. "To end this." His voice was granite. "Once and for all." The halls of Shadowthorn Keep erupted into chaos. Theron's warriors moved like shadows, taking down guards with brutal efficiency. Alarms began to sound, but by then it was too late. They'd already penetrated deep into the fortress. Theron carried Seraphina through corridors slick with blood, his face a mask of controlled violence. She'd never seen him like this. Not the careful king from council chambers. Not even the calculating fighter from the arena. This was the Alpha who had survived 3 centuries of war. This was the beast beneath the crown. They burst into Malakar's private study just as the Lord was gathering documents, preparing to flee. He looked up and his face went white. Impossible, he breathed. You're dead. I saw. You saw what I wanted you to see. Theron set Seraphina carefully on a chair, then advanced on Malakar with predatory intent. Did you really think a simple poison could kill me? I've survived worse attempts than your son's pathetic blade. Kalen stumbled into the room from a side door, half-dressed, Lysandra behind him. They froze when they saw Theron alive and murderous. Guards, Kalen shouted. Guards! Already dealt with, Aldrich said, entering behind them with 3 warriors. Your men are either dead or surrendered. Lysandra's eyes darted toward the window. She moved fast, shifting mid-leap into her wolf form, crashing through glass in a desperate escape attempt. Let her go, Theron said when Aldrich moved to pursue. She's not the real threat. His silver eyes fixed on Malakar and Kalen. You are. Malakar drew himself up, attempting dignity. You have no authority here. This is my domain. My house. You're trespassing. I'm the Alpha King. Theron's voice was soft, lethal. My authority extends everywhere. He gestured to the desk covered in papers. And I believe we'll find all the evidence we need right here. Financial records, letters to enemy territories, documentation of 4 murders. You can't prove anything, Kalen snarled. Can't we? Aldrich moved to the desk, gathering documents with practiced efficiency. Ledgers showing embezzlement. Correspondence negotiating the sale of military intelligence. And what's this? He held up a leather-bound journal. A diary detailing each Omega's death, cause, method. Even the bribes paid to Counselor Grimwald to cover them up. Malakar lunged for the journal, but Theron caught him by the throat, slamming him against the wall with enough force to crack stone. You tortured her, Theron said, his voice barely human. Burned her, chained her with silver. Made her think I was dead while you planned to force a bond. His hand tightened. Give me one reason why I shouldn't kill you right now. Because you're a king, wow, Malakar choked out. Kings don't murder in cold blood. You need trials, evidence, due process. You're right. Theron released him, letting him crumple to the floor. Which is why you'll stand trial before the full council, where every crime will be exposed, every victim's name will be spoken. And justice, his eyes were merciless, will be served. Kalen pulled a knife, wild-eyed and desperate. He lunged not at Theron, but at Seraphina. If I can't have her, no one... He didn't finish the sentence. Theron moved like lightning, intercepting the blade. With one brutal motion, he snapped Kalen's wrist. The knife clattered to the floor. Kalen screamed. Touch her, Theron said quietly, and I'll forget I'm a king. But something was happening to Seraphina. She felt it building inside her. A pressure, a power that had been dormant her entire life, sealed away by childhood trauma and fear. The silver chains had weakened her, yes, but they'd also burned away the last of the seal that had kept her true nature hidden. Ancient blood, original Omega, the power of the moon goddess's first children. When Theron turned back to her, concern in his eyes, she was standing. The burns on her shoulder glowing with silver light. Her eyes had changed, silver, pure silver, like moonlight given form. Seraphina. Theron's voice held wonder and wariness. The seal shattered. Power erupted from her in a wave that shook the entire keep. Malakar and Kalen were thrown back against the walls. Even Theron staggered. And then Seraphina shifted, but not into an ordinary wolf. Her form expanded, silver light blazing so bright it was almost blinding. When the light faded, a massive wolf stood where she had been. Fur like moonlight, eyes like liquid silver, larger than any alpha, larger even than Theron's beast form. A silver wolf, the first seen in over 1,000 years. Malakar stared in horror. Impossible. The silver bloodline was extinct. Power beyond anything you can imagine, a voice said. But it wasn't Seraphina speaking. It was older, vast, divine. The temperature dropped. Frost formed on the windows. And in the center of the room, moonlight coalesced into a form, translucent, beautiful, terrible. The moon goddess herself. Everyone dropped to their knees, even Theron bowed his head in the presence of divinity. Daughter, the goddess said, and her voice was silver bells and thunder. You have awakened. The silver wolf that was Seraphina lowered her head in acknowledgement. For too long my laws have been twisted. The goddess continued, her gaze sweeping over Malakar and Kalen with cold judgment. Used to control rather than guide, to cage rather than protect. She looked at Theron. Rise, Alpha King. You have honored the old ways, given choice where others would force fate. Theron rose silver eyes meeting divine silver with respect, but no fear. And you, the goddess turned to Seraphina. My ancient daughter's blood runs true in you. You were never broken, never defective. You were sleeping, waiting for the one who would see your truth. She gestured to Theron. He saw, he chose. Not because I commanded it, but because his heart recognized yours. Her smile was gentle. That is how bonds should be. Always. She turned to Malachar, and her expression went cold. You have perverted my gifts, used divine law to justify murder. Slavery, torture. Her voice echoed with power. You are unworthy of my blessing. Silver light blazed from her hand. Malachar screamed as the moon goddess's mark burned away from his soul, severing him from the pack, bonds that gave wolves their strength. You will stand trial as a human, she decreed, powerless, as you made so many others feel. Kaelin scrambled backward. Please, I was only following. You were killing innocents and enjoying it. The goddess's judgment was absolute. You too shall be severed. Face justice with the same mortality you inflicted on others. Light blazed again. Kaelin's scream echoed through the keep. Then the goddess faded, her last words hanging in the air. Choose freely, my children. Always choose freely. Silence fell like snow. Seraphina shifted back to human form, but the silver remained in her eyes. Power still hummed beneath her skin. She stood naked in the ruins of the study, moonlight painting her skin silver. Theron immediately removed his coat, draping it around her shoulders. The gesture was protective, possessive, reverent. You're a silver wolf, he said softly. Ancient bloodline. I've only read about them in histories. I didn't know. Seraphina's voice shook. I never knew what I was. You're extraordinary. His hands cupped her face with infinite gentleness. And you're mine, if you'll have me. Through her empath gift amplified now by her awakened power, she felt everything he couldn't say. The love that had grown over the stolen moments and desperate kisses. The fear of losing her. The wonder of finding someone who understood the weight he carried. I'm yours, she whispered. I was yours from the moment you accepted my kiss. He kissed her then deep, claiming while Aldrich's men restrained Malachar and Kaelin, while the evidence of their crimes lay scattered across the desk, while the moon shone silver through broken windows. When they finally broke apart, Theron rested his forehead against hers. Let's go home, he said, and finish this properly. The emergency council convened within hours. Every counselor, every high lord, every witness who could be gathered on short notice. The great hall was packed with wolves eager to see justice served. Seraphina stood beside Theron on the dais, no longer hiding behind him, but standing as his equal. The silver in her eyes had faded to a subtle shimmer, but everyone could feel the power radiating from her. Ancient Omega, Silver Wolf, Divine Daughter. Malachar and Kaelin were dragged before the assembly in chains. Without their wolf strength, they looked diminished. Pathetic. Captain Aldrich presented the evidence. Every document, every ledger. Mira's testimony spoken clearly despite her fear. The journal detailing 4 murders in Kaelin's own hand. Violet Moonspire, Aldrich read, age 23, discovered my embezzlement, fire made to look accidental. Counselor Grimwald paid 3,000 gold to rule it accident. He continued through each name, each crime, each bribe. The hall grew quieter with each revelation. Nobles who had supported House Shadowthorn looked sick. Isabella Fairborn, Aldrich finished, age 24, threatened to expose sale of military secrets. Pushed from cliffs. Counselor Grimwald paid 5,000 gold. Where is Grimwald? Someone shouted. Fled, Theron said, but Captain Aldrich's men are hunting him. He will be found, and he will face justice. He turned to the assembly, his voice ringing with authority. For 3 centuries I have ruled you. I have made mistakes, failed to see corruption festering in my own council. But I see it now. His hand found Seraphina's, their fingers intertwining. This Omega, this silver wolf showed me what I had been blind to. The cruelty hidden beneath divine law. The suffering we've allowed in the name of tradition. The moon goddess herself appeared, he continued. She declared that bonds should be chosen, not forced, that her laws have been perverted. And I agree. Murmurs rippled through the hall. Effective immediately, I decree the following: no Omega shall be forced into a bond against their will. Moon marks can be refused without penalty. An empath testimony will be considered valid evidence in all trials. The hall erupted into chaos. Some cheered, others protested. Theron's alpha dominance rolled out in a wave silencing everyone. I am the Alpha King, he said quietly, and I have spoken. He turned to Malachar. You have been found guilty of conspiracy, murder, treason, and torture. The sentence is death. Malachar's face went white. You have been found guilty of 4 counts of murder, conspiracy, treason, and attempted murder of your king. The sentence is death. Please, Kalen begged, though. I was following my father's orders. I didn't. You kept a journal, Theron interrupted coldly. You documented each kill with pride. There is no mercy for you. He gestured to the guards. Take them. Execution at dawn. As they dragged the condemned away, Theron turned back to the assembly. There is one more matter. His voice softened as he looked at Seraphina. Lady Seraphina Moonwhisper invoked the ancient kiss of claiming. I accepted. That bond stands blessed by the moon goddess herself. He took her hand, raising it high. But more than that, I choose her. Not because law demands it, not because fate decreed it, but because she is brave, strong, compassionate, everything a queen should be. Silver light glowed between their joined hands. I claim Seraphina Moonwhisper as my mate, my Luna, my queen. The hall exploded into cheers. Theron pulled a silver crown from where Aldrich held it. Simple, elegant, ancient. He placed it on Seraphina's head while 500 wolves watched. Long live the Silver Queen, someone shouted. The cry was taken up by hundreds of voices. Long live King Theron, long live Queen Seraphina. Seraphina felt tears streaming down her face. Not from sorrow, from vindication, from the overwhelming rightness of this moment. Those who had called her broken now bowed. Those who had mocked her now cheered, and the king who had protected her now claimed her before all witnesses. Not as property, but as an equal, as his choice. When Theron kissed her, the hall erupted again. And through their joined hands, through the bond forming between them, Seraphina felt his love wrap around her heart like a promise. Forever, 6 months later, spring had come to the Obsidian Palace. Gardens bloomed with flowers that hadn't grown in decades. Reforms were spreading across the kingdom like wildfire. Omegas petitioning to dissolve forced bonds. New counselors replacing those corrupted by Malachar's gold. Empath children being trained instead of hidden. Change. Finally. Seraphina stood in the private gardens, her hand resting on the small swell of her belly. She wore a simple gown of silver and white, her dark hair loose around her shoulders. The crown felt natural now, a symbol of the power she'd always had, but finally learned to wield. There you are. Theron's voice was warm. He crossed the garden and wrapped his arms around her from behind his hands, covering hers on her stomach. How is our little one today? Active. Seraphina leaned back into his embrace. I think he or she is going to be a handful. With our combined stubbornness, absolutely. His lips found her neck, placing gentle kisses along her mark, the claiming mark he'd given her properly in a ceremony of their choosing. But we'll manage. Through their bond fully formed now deeper than any moon mark could ever be, she felt his contentment, his peace. For the first time in 3 centuries, Theron was truly happy. Mira sent word, Seraphina said. The Omega School is almost complete. She'll be the headmistress teaching young empaths to control their gifts. She's come far from the terrified maid we found in that cell. We all have. Seraphina turned in his arms, looking up at him. 6 months ago, I was running from a forced bond. Now I'm a queen, a silver wolf, carrying the next generation of ancient blood. Scared? Theron asked gently. Terrified. She smiled, but also hopeful. Our child will grow up in a kingdom where bonds are chosen, where Omegas have rights, where being different is celebrated, not condemned. A kingdom you helped create. He kissed her forehead. My brave, beautiful queen. Our kingdom, she corrected. We built this together. Together, he agreed, then, softer always together. They stood in the garden as evening fell, the moon rising silver and full. Soon the palace would fill with guests for another celebration. Another reformed law to announce. Another step toward the world they were creating. But for this moment, they were simply Theron and Seraphina. Not king and queen. Not ancient Alpha and Silver Wolf. Just 2 people who had chosen each other when fate would have torn them apart. Do you ever regret it? Seraphina asked quietly. That desperate kiss in the great hall. Everything that came after. Theron's silver eyes softened with love, not for a single second. He placed his hand over her heart, feeling it beat strong and steady. You saved me long before I saved you, remember. We saved each other. Yes. His lips curved in a smile that transformed his entire face, making him look young, despite his centuries. We did. The moon shone down on them, blessing what had begun with desperation and bloomed into love. In the distance, wolves howled in celebration. New life, new laws, new hope. And in the garden, the Silver Queen and her chosen king stood together, their child growing beneath her heart, their future bright with promise. The kiss that had been meant to save her had done so much more. It had saved them both. It had changed a kingdom, and it had proven what the moon goddess herself had declared. Love chosen freely is the strongest bond of all. Far to the north, in a tavern, where criminals gathered, a figure in a dark hood nursed a drink and listened to talk of the Silver Queen, of the reformed laws, of House Shadowthorn's fall. Counselor Grimwald smiled beneath his hood. The king thought he'd won, thought justice had been served, but Grimwald had more secrets than anyone knew. More allies, more plans. The game wasn't over. It had only just begun. But that, as they say, is a story for another time. For now, in the Obsidian Palace, as Seraphina and Theron prepared for the evening celebration, as their child grew strong and healthy, as their kingdom flourished under their joint rule, all was peace. All was joy. All was as the moon goddess intended. A love story written not in the stars but in choices, in courage, in the desperate kiss of a terrified Omega and the ancient king who saw her truth. And they lived as all the best stories promise, happily ever after. The end. 1 year later, the nursery was filled with silver moonlight. Seraphina sat in the rocking chair, cradling a tiny bundle wrapped in soft blankets. Their daughter, had her father's silver eyes and her mother's dark hair. And when she made small fists and yawned, everyone who saw her said the same thing. This child would change the world. Theron stood by the window watching the moon. When he turned, his expression held such tenderness it made Seraphina's breath catch even now. "She's perfect," he said softly, crossing to them all. "She is." Seraphina looked down at her sleeping daughter. "Luna, that's what we'll call her. Luna Nightshade." Theron tested the name. "Our little moon." He sat beside them, his arm around Seraphina's shoulders. Through their bond, she felt his overwhelming love. For her, for their daughter, for the life they'd built together. "I never thought I'd have this," he whispered. "A mate, a child, a family. You deserve it." Seraphina leaned against him. "You deserve all of it." Luna stirred in her arms, eyes opening to reveal silver light. Just for a moment, both parents felt it. The power already awakening in their child. Ancient blood and alpha strength combined. Their daughter would be extraordinary. But more importantly, she would be free. Free to choose her own path, her own mate, her own destiny, just as her parents had chosen each other. Outside, the moon shone bright and full, blessing the family it had brought together through desperate circumstances and forged through love. And in the nursery of the Obsidian Palace, the Silver Queen and the Alpha King held their sleeping daughter and knew that no matter what challenges came, they would face them together. Always together, forever chosen.